Alicia Talabo.
Welcome to the Lepanto Institute's General Quarters. Today we are pleased to have with us Mr. Lacy Edwards. Lacy has spent 30 years as a Silicon Valley software industry CEO, and he just came out with a new book, Takeaways, 101 Lessons from 30 Years as a Silicon Valley CEO. But first, a few points. If you like what we're talking about here, please pass this along to friends and family. We're living in strange times, and we are fairly certain our message has been subject to shadow banning. Also, please hit the subscribe button, then the like button. If you'd like to be kept up to date with all new content, make sure you hit the bell. Lastly, before we get started, it's important to point out we only exist because of strong Catholics like you who support us. If you can afford it, please consider a donation to www.lepantoin.org/donate. With that, let's get at it. Lacy, welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the good work that you and the Lepanto Institute are doing. So,
thanks a lot.
Congratulations on that.
Wonderful. Lacy, it's really important for the folks at home to kind of go through. I've known you many years. You're a good friend, and I've been very impressed with your competence and ethics and everything else. But it's important to tell the folks at home exactly what you've done these past few years. So I'm going to embarrass you for a second, so bear with me. Lacy Edwards has spent over 30 years as a Silicon Valley software industry CEO. He has raised numerous rounds of public and private capital. He's managed several mergers and acquisitions. He has led a successful IPO and has led companies through explosive growth as well as significant downsizing. Lacy served as board member for a number of public and private companies and has mentored CEOs and business leaders, one of which is our friend and mutual friend, Mr. Thomas Charlton at Goliath Technologies. And that's how we met. As an entrepreneur, Lacy started or helped start companies from ground zero to hundreds of employees, hired to turn around stalled companies, built worldwide distribution networks, and served as a limited partner for a number of venture capital firms and private equity funds. We evaluated hundreds of business plans. Now, Lacy has been recognized as CEO of the Year by Insider Magazine. He's been awarded Entrepreneur of the Year by the Harvard Business School Club, and his CEO twice placed companies in the Inc. 500. He's lectured at hundreds of colleges and universities in entrepreneurship and served as an executive in residence for the academic year 2003 and 4 at Auburn University. Today, Lacy is an active public speaker on entrepreneurship and leadership, a management and business strategy consultant, an investment advisor, and the managing partner in your own private equity firm. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's right.
Yes.
That's great. Lacy, it's an honor to have you once again. Lacy, briefly, I want to be a background here, but maybe you could start by telling the folks a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? What brought you to this type of work? That kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I was actually born in Alabama. I'm the youngest of 12 children. And, right in front of me were 6 older sisters. So I never won an argument in my life. So that helped me a lot in running businesses, not to argue with people. But after high school, I joined the Marine Corps and, spent my tour of duty in the Marines. And then after the Marines, I went back to Alabama for 1 year, attended Auburn University for 1 year, and then decided that my fortunes would lie elsewhere. So I took off to California. I was 22 years old, and so I landed in the Bay Area, finished college, went to California State University, and started my career in the mid-'70s in Silicon Valley. First job was with a sales job with the software company. From there, just continued to look for opportunities for growth. I worked for 4 different companies over the next 12 years before I did my first startup in 1986.
Wow.
I went in actually as vice president of sales of that company. 2 years later, took over CEO, and from there, built or helped build 6 companies.
Oh, man. Real quick. So you started out in software sales in the 70s, you said? Is that what I heard correctly?
Late 70s, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, you were really, and then in 86, you took over sales, you became vice president of sales at a software company. You were right at the genre of this.
Well, it was when the software industry was being formed, really, like in the late 70s. Matter of fact, the company that I was working for when I took over, when I went to my first startup, that company was called Informatics Software. It was the third largest software company in the world, and our annual sales were less than $50 million. So it was very, very early in the software industry.
Wow. All right. If we could, let's move over to your book. And I just want to make a couple of comments about it because I actually read it twice. It was that good. First, I must tell you, it was a great book. I read a fair amount of business books, and none like this. And here's why. First, you had a great economy of words. I can't tell you how important that is, especially for a business book. There's none of this stream of consciousness droning. Do you know what I mean? It was, it was, and it was make a point and then explain it. And I was like, wow, I love the format. Second, you made great observations. Some of the observations I never thought of, and you presented in such a straightforward manner that I found it very, very cool. And which leads to my last point. We're going to talk about all of these, but the book was wonderful because it felt more like a conversation. Now, granted, I know you, so all I could think about was having a cigar with you, around a fire pit. You know what I mean? Where you kind of like float a question by Lacy and you get an answer. But when you talked about, if you could tell me first before we get into the actual book, maybe you could tell us about your experience as a CEO and how you came upon the idea to actually write this.
Yeah, good question. Well, over the years, I've always journaled. Now, it's not one of these journals where you sit down and you write everything that happens to you during the day or things like that. My book is kind of a rolling to-do list, but also with observations. And so I was always keeping track of things that I'd learned, important lessons that I had observed, or things that people taught me, and I would make note of those, as well as just notes about all sorts of things. Another thing that I would do, for many, many years, 25 years close, I travel 40 weeks a year. Building companies is a lot of work, and you got to, yeah. So building your distribution system software has to be sold worldwide. You got to cover the whole market, partly because your customers are everywhere. You sell a company here, they have offices and locations all over, so you got to cover them all. So I would travel. I didn't really like using daytime hours to sit in an airplane, so I'd take red eyes. I can't sleep on airplanes. So I started keeping track of what I eventually called BlackBerry philosophies. I had switched from the handwriting everything to Blackberries. So I would make these little gin-infused intelligence, because you sit awake at night, give me another gin time. But I started making these observations of things I'd learned in all areas of life. I accumulated about 1,000 of those and still have them. And so when I come time to write this book, because I always thought I would eventually write a book. Okay, I've learned a lot, and I've had some fantastic experience, and I've been taught so many things by so many people. And I want to come back to how I was taught some of the most important lessons. But I always felt like I really needed to give something back. And what could I impart to a young Lacy Edwards? What would have been good for me to read and learn in the 70s and 80s when I was coming of age, so to speak, in the technology industry? And so that was a big part of the genesis of why this book exists. Now, as far as learning, and I make a point of this in the book, some of the most important lessons I learned in my career and my life were from negative mentors. People taught me what not to do, because so much of success in life and in business is knowing what not to do.
Yeah.
And, staying away from the things that are not going to lead you to where you want to get. So figuring those things out, but just, the disciplines, discipline is a word that, if you look at what it really means, it means don't get off track, stay focused. And so a lot of those lessons were from people that I didn't want to be like. How I learned that is from watching the results of what they were doing.
Wow, I I got to tell you, that's really interesting because I actually, again, it's another thing. You don't hear these things sort of articulated, and that's another example of things that are in the book because I kind of had the same experience. You would work for people and go, wow, that is not the way to do it.
Really?
And,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And I, again, I know you a long time. I know it's very earnest. If we could, let's talk about. I really want to get into some of the specific examples of the book. Again, I thought it was fantastic, but first, I think it's right here. I'd like to stop and offer some context before we get into it. And why is this relevant to our audience at the Lepanto Institute? And the answer is because our job on Earth, let's say, is to evangelize in the one true faith. So given the excellent reporting, for example, Michael Hitchborn has done, it's fair to say that it's becoming more and more difficult to separate, particularly in the Catholic Church, the deposit of faith and frankly, the criminal behavior of some men running the church. Now, unless you are a consecrated religious hermit or something like that, we live in the modern world. So to do the job and, of like call it evangelization properly, it's far greater to approach this as someone who has exhibited professional competence, and plus you have to, feed a family for crying out loud. So you have quite a bit more impact if you enjoy the respect of those around you. Think about it. Who are you going to listen to? So this book, Lacy, is a tremendous resource for anyone who takes this role seriously in the workplace. I'm not just saying this. It's a tremendous blueprint for how to act or conduct your actions so you can learn how to think. That was my takeaway on this. So last observation before we get into the book, contrary to the tenets of the current leftist environment called the Democratic Party, real sustainable employment comes from the private sector, not the government. So, which is entirely congruous with Catholicism. The free market rewards those who provide a service and innovation. This is negotiated and valued by the free market in the form of monetary success. Am I right, Lace? I mean, this is, so monetary, monetary success, right, allows the organization to survive and employ people. Therefore, the viability of that organization and consequently the jobs it provides requires that the organization operate efficiently. In other words, bad organization fails, no jobs, right? So, right, I feel like, sometimes one of these guys, I'm going to go, the guys who create the jobs, you're killing. And this is not a new thing. FDR did it in the 1930s, and this has been going on forever. It's beyond my comprehension how we've elected leaders who think that wealth simply exists. It needs to only be redistributed. They've exhibited a stunning and frankly dangerous ignorance as to the necessity of creating it, right? So my earnest belief is that they're actually being willfully blind, or they simply don't care and are concerned only with power. So, since it's obvious to provide employment for people, the organization issuing the payroll checks must be solvent and healthy. You know all about this, Lace. This book is wonderful in the sense that it addresses how everybody needs to think along certain lines, not just the leaders of the organization. Actually, to your own experience in the Marine Corps, everyone's leaders, right? I mean, that's sort of the idea, right? Right. And this book is sort of a cliff notes for how to think and execute correct decision-making on literally every level, from the janitor to the CEO. When I went through it, I read it twice. When I read through it the first time, I was like, a few things sort of struck me. Second time, that's what hit me. Everybody can use this. So Lacy, I'm going to pick out a couple of examples I found extremely insightful. And the first one, which on its face may not appear to be all that insightful, but as you read into it, I thought it was tremendous. And it was your number 9. Well-developed and published public speaking skills will take you a long way. Now, okay, great. We all know that. But you go on to say, and I thought this is really cool because let's face it, this is the third rail with most people. They do not like to get up, and yet it is absolutely imperative. And I picked out something here which I've actually employed since I read your book, but I've never seen this written down. Practice giving your complete speech aloud at least 25 times. Now, think about that. So if you have called it a 30-minute speech, that's 12 and a half hours. If it's that important, that is great advice, Lace. And I'd like you to comment on all this, but before I start, you open up by saying, few things you will ever do can make a bigger difference in your career faster than the ability to deliver an interesting, relevant, and powerful speech, right? And I agree with you 100%. Tell me a little bit about how you got there. Tell me about, what your thoughts are on that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, public speaking, it's a fear, and some people say greater than death.
Right.
And it is the number one fear people have. But in the way to overcome that, even if you're not one of those people that enjoys it, preparation.
Yes.
And I never stand up in front of it to give a formal speech. I know every word I'm going to say, every single word, every pause. I've practiced it. I've rehearsed it. I know exactly how I want to deliver. I have certain philosophies about public speaking. My personal one is every 3 minutes, I need to have him either laughing or crying, or I'm going to lose him. So I change things and put things to accomplish that. And like, for example, humor, it's very dangerous because
You wrote that.
well rehearsed, it'll fall flat.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were going to comment?
Oh, no, I was going to say that you wrote that. I forgot about that. You wrote that. That's a very good point because I think you said you better know your audience and be very adept to this, or it could bomb or something like that. Right?
Absolutely. You will. So, what's interesting is that when I give my speech or practice it 25 times, almost every time I will take something out. Because then that, when I put a new speech together, you cover a lot of different things, but my intention there is to go through it so many times to know what's not working. And you only know that by just repetitive rehearsal. Now, here's another secret. See, I give the same speech, like at these colleges and universities. Most of it's about entrepreneurship. I give the same speech, week after week. I know it so well. So people, they're hearing it for the first time. I'm hearing it for the 50th time. And you get really, really good. So repetitive that way, if you give the same speech in different audiences, you will get very good at it. No matter what your basic skill level, you'll find out what's work, what the audience responds to, and pretty much they all respond to the same kind of thing.
Wow. Again, great advice. And I don't think I have read things on public speaking, and I've never read anyone quantify it like that. And I got to tell you, I think that's incredibly valuable. You also said something else. And now that I think about it, you also said have a go-to humorous story or something.
Yeah.
Did you tell me about that a little bit? Because I think that's wonderful because what that means for the audience is there are times when you will be called to speak unexpectedly. And if you have a go-to story, you can turn what could be a disaster into a major win, basically. Go ahead, Lacy.
No kidding. Yeah, that's happened to me so many times because you'll get it. Like someone will notice that you're there and just say, "Please stand up and tell us about yourself." And most people will stand up and say, "This is my name." This, just wrote things. But if you interject a little humorous story in that, I mean, it sets you apart from everyone. They will remember that. So, and I think I use the example in the book. I was asked to do that at a speech in Colorado. I mean, at a conference in Colorado. Just we got Lacy Edwards, he was CEO, and so I stood up and I did the unexpected. I told him a story. Well, right after that, up walks the Chamber of Commerce from one of the larger cities and said, "We've got an event coming up. How would you like to be the keynote speaker?" And I think the story I gave was just from and we all have stories. Public speaking is about telling stories.
Yes.
I don't look at public speaking as teaching. It's telling stories. It's entertainment.
Right.
And so you tell stories and human stories. Self-effacing humor is the most effective kind.
No doubt. And and one of the real quick, one of the, again, to use the word takeaway from the story you just said is you were prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, right? You remember, I think the premise or the title of the point was, I don't have it in front of me, but was something like always be prepared with a humorous story. And again, you think about that. And I would also think that it takes away, you do this certain amount of times, you understand again how to think, which I love about your book, teaches you how to think. You're prepared. You're always prepared. And I think that is monster. And that's what separates the competent from the incompetent in a way.
Yeah.
In perception, certainly in perception, and sometimes perception's everything. You know?
That is so true.
Yeah. And so let me just see here. This is great. Okay. Second one I wanted to bring up that I really liked. Point number 34. High morale when times are bad is impossible. Celebrating success is the only remedy. Now, before you say something, I hear these corporate retreat things and I just shake my head. No, and by the way, I don't think I've ever seen that written down, and I've always thought it, and I thought that was fantastic. Comment on that, will you, Lacy?
Sure. Well, I've experienced the same thing you have, Jim, which is seeing companies, and even companies I worked for early in my career would have retreats and have motivational speakers come in and do all of these things to try to get people's morale and build them up and everything. When in fact the problem is that they didn't feel like they were succeeding, and you can't make people feel successful by making them laugh or feeding them or taking them all day. It just doesn't work. Yeah. So the only thing that I've ever seen that will build morale, pull a team together, get people motivated and moving in the right direction is when you're talking about their success, their individual success, and how to build on it. And that's everything else. It's a waste of money for these retreats like that.
Right, and in that, and also in a way, isn't it childish?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like where you're just kind of like, okay, mom and dad we're feeling bad, so they're going to buy us an ice cream cone. No, I loved what you wrote. And again, by the way, that chapter was one paragraph. That's what I liked about your book. And it was like it really nailed it. And you go, no, I don't need an ice cream cone. What I do is I need someone to lead us out of the forest. So I can.
I'm flucking my math class. Let's talk. Help me get past that, so I feel good about the work that I'm actually doing. Ice cream's not going to get me there.
No, that's perfect. And the book's full of these kinds of nuggets, and that's why I was sort of saying for anyone at home, whether I understand the demographics of our audience, but for anyone who's involved in an endeavor in any organization and really takes and wants to invest in their career and their effectiveness, that's what I would say. If you want to invest in your effectiveness, read this book. And the other part of it is if you would like to invest in your family members, and their effectiveness, particularly somebody who is coming out of college or just starting a career, or a young person, I think it's just tremendous. So I got the third one here, Lace, and just give me a second to find it here. Oh yeah, this was great. When you've done your best and all the cards are on the table, don't be afraid to walk away. Tell me about that.
Well, you may have heard this, but the one who usually wins a negotiation is the one who's willing to walk away.
Yes.
And so if you're in a negotiation, you want to figure out as quickly as you can if that person is willing to walk away, and then of course then you figure out at what point and where are they. So it's an advantage in negotiating to really recognize that. But for yourself, and when you enter a negotiation, if you have to win no matter what, you're at a disadvantage.
Yes.
So you've got to be willing to walk away at some point. You got to know when that is. That's so important. How far are you willing to go where you're going to say, okay, I'm not willing to go any further. This is as far as I'm going to go. Here's my deal. Let me know if you want it, and walk away. I gave an example in there of we're negotiating a very large deal in London, multi-million-dollar deal. And we were competing against IBM. We're a small company from Colorado. And IBM came in and almost cut their price almost in half. And so the negotiator, the purchasing person said, IBM's, done all this, didn't tell us the numbers, but they really cut their price. We want your best and final. Now, I felt like we were very comfortably had a good solution, if not the best, the better one. And so I just said, you got it. You've got our best price. We're not negotiating. We're not. Walked away, went back to my hotel, and got a phone call about an hour later from the CIO who said, "We accept your proposal."
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, we could have given, we would have won it, but we could have given up hundreds of $1,000s to do that. But I felt like we had done the best we could do, and I was just not willing to compromise just to buy the business. And
That's
it
right.
worked. That's worked almost every time.
Lace, I got to ask you this, because the one thing that comes to mind as I'm listening to you is, as that's going along, there's got to be a certain amount of strategy and poker playing going on. You cannot let the other side know that you need that business. Now, my guess is, having known people that worked for the company you just referenced as your competition, IBM, they walked in there and said, "We've got to get this." Somebody's boss told them that we've got to get this. And I'm sure that was a loss for them. Had to have been,
It was.
And I think, which leads to the other point, it's certainly not about price at times. It's about effectiveness
And relationship.
Yes, right. So they know they can count on you. And that's a big part of it. But that was another, and again, this book is full of this kind of stuff. And I think, and I don't recall really reading that anywhere else either. So Lace, this is, and this is not meant to embarrass you, but I like this one a lot though, because I thought this was a very cool chapter that you wrote, because it showed that that you're a human being, and I really liked it a lot. It said, recognition can be a good thing until you start believing your own press.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Please take it away, because I think anyone out there can really identify with that statement. But to your credit, you wrote that down. That really stuck out to me. Tell me about that.
Well, there were a number of times when I fell prey to that sort of thing, but fortunately, it became fewer and fewer. And back was my first CEO job. I had an excellent marketing PR department, and they got my name in everything. I mean, if there was an article about technology or leadership, somehow they figured out how to get my name in there, and I started getting all sorts of recognition for that, and was speaking at conferences and getting, won a couple of awards, being praised, and it kind of filled me up with that I really can do this stuff. I can really accomplish this.
You were regularly quoted in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. So I mean, how much more can you ask?
I wasn't regularly quoted in the Wall Street Journal.
And though, so I was in the late 30s, early 40s, and all of a sudden I just didn't want to listen to anybody, because and part of that overconfidence came across to my leadership team. And one of the things as a leader you have to do is you have to participation, input, and have critical thinking, and people challenge you. Well, I became so confident no one would challenge me, and the reason is because they knew I wouldn't listen.
Oh yeah.
So they stopped giving me the kind of advice that I really needed to have. So I made a couple of big mistakes strategically with the company, because and I at the time I was thinking, well, it must be right, because nobody's challenging me, everybody's agreeing. But I was the one that was causing that. And so I finally realized that. And so I started I got to shut my mouth, and I got to stop believing all this stuff. And I got to get the team around me that I built to help me grow this company. Got to get them to tell me what they think. Let's collectively make the right decision. Take my ego out of it. Take the fact that I think I'm fantastic and can do no wrong, and put that in a box and never look at it again, and get my team to help me make the decisions so we can move ahead with and critical thinking is so important. Collective intelligence. You won't get that unless you bring it out of the other people. And as the CEO, that title is kind of intimidating anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so just a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine for 35 years, we've worked together and we've done a lot of things together. He made the comment. He says, there are a lot of times during the time we worked together, I was intimidated by you. And I said, how? Why? He says, your title. It's just, when you have that much vested authority.
Yeah.
It's and you know, you got to recognize that as a leader, and not, you know, you got to put that away, overcome that part of being a leader, being a CEO, so that other people will not be afraid to tell you, hey, you're full of BS, because you got to have that.
Well, that's very powerful. You know, which leads to another one of your points, if I remember correctly. Don't surround yourself with yes men. Didn't you write that, or was that in this?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that, please.
Right. Yeah. No, you. Well, well, part of it, you can turn people into yes men if you got all the authority.
Yes, by the culture,
Yeah.
by you
So,
being in charge of the culture. Yeah.
yeah.
Can you talk about this a little bit, because I think that's really, really key. I think that there is. My thought is that when people are, and it's human nature, when people are raising families and that kind of thing, and they have mortgages to pay, there's a tendency to be a yes man in a certain environment. And if that's being, I guess, if that's being perpetuated by the top down, that's really lethal to the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, part of it is, you know, the first part is surrounding yourself with the right kind of people. But secondly, letting them know that you're going to listen to them. One of the things, when I would have my planning sessions and strategy sessions, I never let anybody know what I was thinking. Never.
Yes.
Because some people, when they hear me say what I'm thinking, or I express my opinion, they assume that's what we're going to do anyway. So they stop contributing. So,
Oh, right.
yeah. So
Oh,
the
wow.
thing is, make sure they don't know. I mean, I even say, look, guys, we're here together. You know, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, which I also talk about that.
Right.
So, but make sure, and I look at them and it's like, you guys have skills and expertise that I don't have, which is why you're here. So let's collectively figure out what are the right things to do, critically think about the challenges that we're facing, and come up with, you know, the most intelligent decision collectively we can. And keep asking questions, because your job as a leader is to make sure that the best decision gets made. And it's almost always a collective decision where a number of people participate. Never comes from just one person. And you certainly should not be coming from the CEO.
Right. Fair enough. And which brings you to the, if I could, I thought this is really interesting. The last point, we'll go through the book, but it's very necessary in for the viability of the organization at times to cut out the bottom 20% at times, but you have to fire people in order to keep the ship floating. We've constantly got to, you know, make it's a requirement. And you had a very interesting philosophy on that. And you know, like, could you could you speak a little bit to that, because I thought it was really interesting. Basically, by the time you closed the door and by the time you sat down, that news was out and it was unequivocal. Could you talk about that a little bit? And I know you take no joy in this, because you even said, as bad as that guy's feeling, as bad as I'm feeling, that guy's feeling worse. You know, so it really shows some empathy there.
Yeah. Well, if you ever get used to that, then something's wrong. You know, that it's a tragic thing to have to take away someone's livelihood. That's a very, very sad thing to be doing, but it's part of business and it has to be done.
Yes.
At times, you're doing no one any favors by leaving them a job that they're not succeeding. So, what the process I use that just developed over time, partly from not communicating effectively and knowing I had to get better at it. So, when I have to terminate someone's employment, I greet them at the door, ask them to have a seat. I close the door, and as I'm walking around to my desk, I say, the reason for this meeting is that we're terminating your employment. This decision has been made, and I will discuss as long as you want to why, but we will not have any discussion about changing the decision. It is made, it's final, and we can't discuss that. And then by the time I've said that before, I said in my chair. So they know exactly, you know, what's going to happen. And stating that we cannot discuss. And when they bring it up, you know, like, well, why? We can talk about why, but I will, during that conversation, we'll have to reiterate, by the way, remember, the decision is final. It will not be revisited.
Yes.
And, yeah. And it's but your point about, you know, you feel bad doing that, but you don't feel as bad as they do.
Right. And the overriding theme here is, sad as it is, this is absolutely necessary.
It is right. Yeah.
It absolutely, in order to provide a service and jobs for everyone, the organization itself has got to be viable, and that requires. And I think, going to my earlier points, I think this is something that is absolutely missing from, let's call it, the left. No understanding of how a business operates, no understanding on or where actually tax revenue comes from. But that's for another show, Lace, which I want to have you back on. Lace, do me a favor. So this was, again, I really enjoyed this, by the way. Tell me something. So now the book's fantastic. I recommend that everyone get this. What are you doing now after these years of experience? Tell us a little bit what you're doing now. You know what you're doing now. You've had 30 years in the trenches as a CEO in Silicon Valley. Now your life's taken a slightly new direction. Just talk a little bit about that, an overview.
Sure. Yeah. We're happy to. Well, my primary day job is, I'm with a private equity firm. We make investments. So I do the evaluation, the due diligence, and investment recommendation. And the private equity firm is a combination of a couple of family offices, my own equity fund, and collectively we make investments almost exclusively in technology. I mean, it's what I spent my career doing. So why not leverage that experience of looking at what these companies are likely to achieve? And so I make investments for myself and for a group of other people in mostly technology. I also do public speaking. I enjoy that a lot. And of course, that has been kind of shut down for the last year or plus because people aren't getting together. I've done a couple of virtual talks, but that's you lose the audience participation, which is
Yeah.
So I do public speaking, and then I get hired as a consultant, business strategy consultant for companies who feel like that there's growth opportunities for them in certain segments of their business, and I can spend a few days with their executive team, mostly going and asking questions, Jim. That's what I do. My consulting is not telling people what to do, is helping them figure it out by asking a lot of questions and leading them through the decision process to come up with what they need to be doing differently that will have a different outcome.
Yes, and you were very clear about that in the book as well. You talked quite a bit about that. And I thought it came across very, very well, which also speaks to the fact why you were on a plane 4 out of 6 weeks your entire life.
40 weeks a year, right?
Yeah, 40 weeks a year. That Lace, I got to tell you, we're going to be closing it up, and I got to tell you, I really enjoyed this. I mean,
likewise, Jim.
I got it. So I'll be back here in a second. Just a couple things in closing. I just need to say a few more things about Lacy's book. First, this book is a gift to those who are serious about investing in themselves. Those who are serious about their careers and contributing to that success of themselves and the organizations they work for. And if you have sons or daughters, really consider getting this. And you can pick up the book at www.takeaways101.com. Right, Lace? That's where you can pick it up. Right. And also you can. And
by the way, it's available on about 30 different websites. But if you order it off this one, it's the same price, free shipping. I sign them all.
Yeah,
a personal note in that one.
That fantastic. Also, Lacy, they can reach you at this website too, right?
Yes, they can.
But yeah, I mean, and remember, that's fantastic. Remember also the premise here. You want to defend your Catholic faith. You have more credibility coming at it from a standpoint of someone who has demonstrated competence to those around them, whether that's in an organization, in your community. I think it's really, really important. Lastly, one more time, it's important to point out we only exist because of strong Catholics like you who support us. If you're so inclined and can afford to, please donate to LepantoIN.org/donate. That's LepantoIN.org/donate. Or the second way, if you're looking for a great gift for yourself or someone else, please visit our store at LepantoCatholicGifts.com. And we have a beautiful Lepanto Sacred Heart Cross. It's solid silver, not hollow. And frankly, it's beautiful. Michael Hitchport designed it. He fully credits Our Lady with the inspiration. We're selling this as a sacramental and strongly urge you to get it blessed. So we are saying goodbye to my good friend, Mr. Lacy Edwards. Silicon Valley
Thank you,
CEO,
Jim.
30 years, experienced author of Takeaways 101, Lessons from 30 Years as a Silicon Valley CEO. I'm saying it again, please get this book. I don't care what other business books you've read in the past or whatever. You really need to think about this book. I assure you it's one of a kind. Lacy, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Jim. It's good seeing you. And hopefully this will be behind us and we can grab another cigar around the campfire.
Yes, we're going to be doing that real soon, Lace. Anyway, God bless and thanks for coming on, buddy.
God bless you. Thank you.
This is Jim Mon for the Lepanto Institute, General Quarters, saying goodbye. Have a great day. Viva Cristo Rey. Bye-bye.